The word mafia conjures images of hidden power and a secret world operating just beneath the surface of society. But where did this notorious organization truly begin, and how did it come to so profoundly impact American society and politics? For centuries, a shadow organization has intrigued and terrified, its roots stretching deep into Sicilian soil, but its true power blossomed on American shores. Our story starts in 19th century Sicily, a land plagued by deep poverty, weak central governance, and the indifference of absentee landlords. In this turbulent environment, a culture of omerta, or a code of silence and distrust of official authority, fostered secretive groups. Informal protection brotherhoods known as Cosa Nostra, or Our Thing, emerged to fill the gaping void left by the state, acting as a parallel government, offering their own brand of justice and building power through intimidation. As the late 1800s saw waves of millions of impoverished southern Italians migrating to America in search of a better life, they brought their traditions with them. Within these communities and adapting to a new land, the nascent seeds of organized crime crossed the Atlantic. In the crowded tenements of bustling cities like New York and Chicago, early manifestations like the Black Hand were primarily extortion rackets preying on fellow new arrivals. These fragmented street gangs quietly took root, exploiting community vulnerabilities, but they had yet to become the formidable enterprise that would later dominate the criminal underworld. That all changed with a single piece of legislation. The 18th Amendment, enacting prohibition in 1920, became the Mafia's greatest catalyst. The nationwide ban on alcohol inadvertently ignited the organization's true rise, creating a massive, lucrative, and completely illegal market. This was the perfect opportunity for ambitious criminal groups. Mafia families, already skilled in illicit trade, seized control of bootlegging operations across the nation. Their illegal breweries and clandestine distribution networks, along with countless speakeasies, generated immense untaxed profits on an unprecedented scale. This explosion of illicit wealth was the fuel for their rapid and often violent growth, transforming loosely connected immigrant gangs into sophisticated, well-funded, and powerful national syndicates. Figures like Al Capone in Chicago and Lucky Luciano in New York consolidated their influence, building criminal empires that would solidify their financial foundations and dramatically expand their reach for decades to come. This immense new wealth brought with it profound and dangerous influence. With their riches, mafia families began a systematic infiltration of city governments and law enforcement, ushering in a pervasive era of corruption. Bribery became a standard and rampant practice. Politicians, judges, and police were bought, intimidated, or otherwise compromised. This political leverage provided a crucial shield, securing protection for illegal operations, ensuring favorable court outcomes, and guaranteeing that law enforcement would often turn a blind eye. Through financial leverage and threats of violence, they swayed elections, manipulated public officials, and corrupted police forces from the beat cop to the chief. This allowed them to operate with alarming impunity, creating a powerful parallel government that deeply eroded public trust and compromised civic integrity from within. Beyond the halls of government, the Mafia saw immense opportunity in the burgeoning American labor movement. They aggressively seized control of powerful labor unions, with the International Brotherhood of Teamsters being the most famous example. By infiltrating these powerful organizations, manipulating union elections, and intimidating members, they gained leverage over entire industries. This control allowed them to extort businesses through threats of orchestrating crippling strikes or promising labor peace for a substantial fee. Union funds were embezzled, and control over leadership secured lucrative sweetheart contracts for their own front companies, subverting the legitimate power of labor for their own illegitimate gains. Their economic tentacles reached ever deeper into the legitimate economy, targeting lucrative sectors like construction, waste management, and shipping. The construction industry proved immensely profitable. Organized crime families rigged bids on major public contracts, ensuring their companies won the jobs, often at inflated prices paid by taxpayers. Infrastructure projects frequently became conduits for their profits, allowing them to launder vast sums of illicit money through what appeared to be legitimate businesses. They monopolized essential urban services, cementing their control over the vital arteries of city life. This demonstrated a sophisticated economic leverage and an unnerving ability to corrupt the free market itself, funneling vast sums of money from citizens and into their own pockets. For decades, the Mafia operated largely in the shadows, its existence often flatly denied by authorities who were either complicit or simply overwhelmed. However, the 1950s brought a critical turning point with the televised Kiefer hearings. These Senate investigations, broadcast nationally, offered a shocking glimpse into the organized crime network, exposing its structure and bringing prominent figures and their illicit activities into the living rooms of a stunned American public. For the first time, the name Cosa Nostra was introduced to the national vocabulary. Later investigations by law enforcement and government commissions continued to peel back the layers, revealing the true and staggering extent of their systemic influence. The era of plausible deniability was over. Though the overt power and classic structure of the traditional mafia have diminished over the years, its legacy of systemic corruption and exploitation endures. The early activities of the American mafia cast a long, enduring shadow. Their methods of bribery, intimidation, infiltration of legitimate institutions, and manipulation of economic systems laid a blueprint for financial crime that persists. While overt violence has receded, the methods of influence persist in subtler, more sophisticated forms, a shadow reminding us of the deep infiltration into business and politics that shaped the fabric of modern society. The American Mafia, a name synonymous with shadowy figures, hidden power, and organized crime, has a complex history deeply intertwined with immigration and the underbelly of American enterprise. To truly understand its grip on society, we must journey back to its origins, steeped in the rugged landscapes of 19th century Sicily. Here, a culture of fierce independence, ancient traditions of omerta, or the code of silence, and a deep, pervasive mistrust of official authority gave rise to a powerful, informal system of justice. In a land often neglected by distant rulers and plagued by a power vacuum, communities turned to local strongmen who provided protection and settled disputes outside the law. This mafia was less a single criminal syndicate and more a system of patronage and fear, becoming a formidable shadow government. As the late 1800s saw a mass exodus of Italians to America, escaping systemic poverty and hardship, they unknowingly brought these traditions across the Atlantic. Arriving in the bustling, often chaotic immigrant neighborhoods of New York, Chicago, and New Orleans, they faced severe discrimination and were often left to fend for themselves. In these crowded urban centers, familiar protective structures re-emerged, initially offering aid to new arrivals navigating a hostile world. However, within these insular communities, the absence of strong state institutions created fertile ground for these associations to morph into criminal enterprises. Groups like the Black Hand became notorious for exploiting their own, demanding protection money from vulnerable fellow immigrants and resolving disputes with an authority enforced by intimidation. The truly explosive growth of mafia power in America, however, arrived with the 18th Amendment in 1920, Prohibition. This single legislative act was an unparalleled gift to organized crime. The national ban on alcohol created a black market of unimaginable scale, a golden opportunity for those operating outside the law. Bootlegging, the illegal production and distribution of alcohol, became incredibly lucrative. Mafia families, with their established networks and penchant for violence, were perfectly positioned to capitalize on this new market. They swiftly moved to monopolize bootlegging, ruthlessly eliminating rivals to consolidate their control. The massive, untaxed profits provided an immense influx of capital, transforming small-time gangsters into multi-millionaires overnight, and funding their rapid expansion into other illicit ventures like gambling, prostitution, and loan sharking, solidifying their grip on the American underworld. With this newfound wealth, the mafia's ambitions grew far beyond the streets. They began to systematically infiltrate the very fabric of American governance and industry. Through a calculated blend of bribery, ruthless intimidation, and sometimes even voter manipulation, mafia families influenced local elections to ensure friendly politicians were in power. Judges, prosecutors, and police officials were bought or threatened, creating a climate of impunity and a pervasive shadow government. This shield of protection allowed them to operate their illicit activities without fear of legal consequences, as legislation was crafted to favor their interests, and law enforcement was instructed to look the other way. Their reach extended into the powerful labor unions, which became another critical target. Organizations like the Teamsters were particularly vulnerable to mafia control due to their strategic position in logistics and transportation. By gaining control over these unions, mafia bosses could extort businesses with threats of crippling strikes or, for a price, provide labor peace, guaranteeing uninterrupted operations. Unions became instruments for racketeering, ensuring a constant flow of illicit income through skimmed pension funds and a stranglehold over various sectors. This control granted them immense economic leverage and a deceptive veneer of legitimacy, allowing them to influence entire industries, from garbage collection to trucking. Beyond unions, the mafia moved to launder their vast sums of illegal money through legitimate-seeming industries, particularly construction and public contracts. The construction industry became a prime vehicle for these activities. Mafia-controlled companies ensured their firms won lucrative public works projects by rigging bids and intimidating competitors, monopolizing vital sectors and stifling legitimate competition. They owned crucial economic sectors, from waste management to shipping, allowing them to inflate costs on government projects and siphon public funds under a veneer of legality. This dual revenue stream of legitimate-looking business and outright racketeering allowed them to appear as upright businessmen while continuing their criminal enterprises in the shadows, entrenching their financial power. For decades, their power grew largely unchecked, but the tide began to turn in the 1950s as their operations were dragged into the light. The public's awareness truly ignited with the Kefauver hearings, a series of televised Senate investigations that shocked the nation. For the first time, the American public saw the faces of mafia leaders and heard testimony that publicly exposed the organization's vast reach and systemic corruption. Later investigations and the bombshell testimony of former mobsters like Joe Valachi continued to peel back the layers of their power, breaking the sacred code of silence and unveiling the intricate web of organized crime to a horrified public. These hearings shone a harsh spotlight on their pervasive influence, forcing law enforcement to finally confront them directly. While many leaders initially eluded conviction, the era of operating in complete secrecy was over. The overt power and violence of the American mafia have waned significantly since those peak years. However, the legacy of its early activities is profound and left an indelible mark on the country. The blueprint for systemic corruption, bribery, quid pro quo politics, intimidation, and the infiltration of legitimate systems was honed by these crime syndicates. This legacy persists in American business and politics today, often in subtler, less visible, and more sophisticated forms of economic manipulation and influence. Understanding these roots, from the Sicilian origins to the Prohibition-era expansion and the deep institutional infiltration, is crucial to recognizing the enduring challenges of organized crime and corruption in our society. It serves as a stark reminder of how easily power can be subverted and how the shadows of the past continue to shape the present. Illegal alcohol became a multi-billion-dollar industry overnight. Huge illicit profits awaited. Mafia families, with their already established networks from Italy and within immigrant communities, swiftly dominated bootlegging, accumulating vast wealth. Figures like Al Capone in Chicago and Lucky Luciano in New York orchestrated complex smuggling operations, transforming local street gangs into powerful national syndicates, often after brutal conflicts like the Castellamarese War of the early 1930s. Vast illicit profits allowed the mafia to systematically infiltrate city governments, twisting the very fabric of American democracy. Bribery became their most potent weapon, corrupting politicians, judges, and police chiefs alike. Through intimidation, they rigged elections, stuffing ballot boxes and threatening voters, ensuring favorable outcomes and virtual impunity locally. Their tentacles extended deeply into legitimate sectors, notably through pervasive labor union infiltration. Unions like the Teamsters, controlling vital transportation and supply chains, became prime targets. By installing puppet leaders such as those associated with Jimmy Hoffa, the mafia exploited union power to extort businesses, orchestrate debilitating strikes, and secure lucrative contracts. They aggressively monopolized industries from construction to waste management and shipping, using sophisticated schemes involving rigged bids, shell companies, and systematic money laundering, often diverting public funds. Despite their clandestine operations, the sheer scale of mafia power couldn't remain hidden forever. Public exposure was imminent. The landmark 1950s Kefauver hearings, captivatingly televised across the nation, offered a shocking glimpse into their pervasive influence. Public testimonies from witnesses like Frank Costello revealed the extensive mafia reach, sparking widespread outrage and prompting further federal investigations, including those leading to the crucial RICO Act. The mafia's blueprint for illicit enterprise, forged in this era, undeniably shaped systemic corruption in business and politics that, though subtler, tragically persists today, a lasting testament to their historical impact. To truly understand how this syndicate became so powerful, we must trace its story back, not to bustling New York, but to 19th century Sicily. Amidst poverty and weak governance, a protective, violent, parallel power structure emerged. As Italian immigrants arrived in late 1800s America, they brought these communal bonds. Transplanted to chaotic immigrant neighborhoods, these groups provided protection, slowly consolidating power through illicit activities. The true explosion of mafia power came with the 18th Amendment, prohibition. The nationwide thirst for illegal alcohol created a black market worth billions, an opportunity the mafia seized. With established networks and ruthless efficiency, they became master bootleggers. Massive profits provided unprecedented wealth, allowing expansion, bribery, and solidification of their hierarchical structures. This new wealth enabled deep infiltration into American politics. Mafia families mastered bribery, influencing local elections, securing favorable judges and corrupting police forces. Their grip extended to city services, ensuring unimpeded business and neutralizing rivals. This systemic corruption blurred lines between legitimate governance and organized crime. Beyond politics, the mafia targeted labor unions. Infiltrating powerful organizations like the Teamsters, they gained control over vast workforces, extorting businesses and skimming union dues. The construction industry became another stronghold. They rigged bids for public contracts, laundered illicit money, and monopolized services like waste management and shipping. This pervasive shadow integrated criminal activities deeply into the legitimate economy, their influence becoming too vast to ignore. The 1950s Kefauver hearings, televised nationally, offered a shocking glimpse into this shadowy world. These investigations exposed mafia leaders and their infiltration of American society. The legacy of these early mafia activities is profound. While overt violence has receded, the methods pioneered, systemic bribery, political influence, and financial exploitation, shaped lasting patterns of corruption. These tactics persist today in subtler, sophisticated forms. Understanding this history is crucial to recognizing how deeply entrenched organized crime's roots became in America's economic and political fabric. This entity, now synonymous with organized crime, didn't simply materialize. Its intricate roots trace to 19th century Sicily, specifically the mid-1800s, where Cosa Nostra, or Our Thing, emerged from centuries of feudal oppression and a severe vacuum of central authority. As millions of Italian immigrants sought new lives in America in the late 1800s, they unwittingly carried the seeds of this system, transplanting its secretive traditions to new soil. The 18th Amendment, enacting prohibition nationwide on January 17, 1920, created an unprecedented opportunity for expansion. The alcohol ban sparked a massive illicit market, transforming bootlegging into an incredibly lucrative enterprise. Mafia families seized this chance, building vast criminal empires, acquiring immense wealth and illicit power quickly. Emboldened by wealth, mafia families systematically infiltrated city governments. Bribery became commonplace, often influencing key elections, judges, and local police departments. Through intimidation, they neutralized law enforcement and legal oversight. This ensured operations continued unchecked, deeply weaving themselves into urban power structures. Beyond politics, labor unions offered another lucrative avenue. Control over organizations like the Teamsters allowed them to extort businesses, demand protection, and secure lucrative contracts. Union strong-arms enforced their will, making it impossible for legitimate businesses to operate without their blessing. This influence extended to vital sectors. Mafia enterprises rigged bids, laundered vast sums, and monopolized industries like construction, waste management, and shipping. Their grip tightened on infrastructure, ensuring continuous cash flow and further entrenching their power within American commerce. For decades, the mafia operated in shadows, but public awareness grew. The 1950s Kefauver hearings publicly revealed the mafia's pervasive influence. Later investigations exposed their operations, shattering the myth of invisibility. The legacy of these early activities is profound. While overt violence has largely subsided, the systemic corruption fostered by the mafia's rise persists, challenging our institutions today. At the heart of this challenge is a name that became synonymous with power: the American Mafia. How did this network take root in the United States? Its true origins lie in 19th century Sicily. Men of honor provided protection where the state failed. Poverty drove many southern Italian immigrants to America, bringing unique traditions and distrust of formal authority. In crowded US cities, these traditions found fertile ground. Insular communities relied on themselves. This environment was ripe for criminal enterprises, initially focusing on small-scale protection rackets. Prohibition in 1920 truly catalyzed the mafia's dramatic rise. The 18th Amendment created a vast black market. Mafia families quickly capitalized on bootlegging. Operations became incredibly profitable, generating unprecedented wealth. This vast income transformed localized gangs into sophisticated criminal empires, expanding their influence dramatically. With new economic might, mafia families infiltrated city governments through systematic bribery and intimidation. They controlled local elections, compromised judges, and bought off police, operating with shocking impunity. This corruption wasn't limited to politics. Organized crime gained a stranglehold on vital labor unions like the Teamsters. Mafia bosses exploited unions to extort businesses, secure contracts, and siphon massive funds nationwide. The construction industry also proved a rich vein. Mafia families rigged bids, laundering illicit money. They monopolized essential services: waste management, shipping, controlling entire supply chains, and eliminating competition. For decades, the mafia operated in shadows, its influence denied. But the 1950s brought change. The Kefauver hearings, televised Senate investigations, finally pulled back the curtain on their national network. Americans witnessed testimony exposing deep ties to politics and legitimate businesses. Public awareness soared. These investigations chipped away at the mafia's overt power. While direct control waned, its impact remained. Strategies perfected: bribery, racketeering, contract rigging established blueprints for systemic corruption. Their legacy subtly persists today, shaping the very fabric of US business and politics. This journey, from whispers in Sicilian villages to the corridors of power in American cities, intertwines the grand themes of history, immigration, and opportunity. This isn't just a story of crime, it's a narrative of adaptation and the complex evolution of power. Its roots lie in 19th century Sicily, where secret societies emerged, responding to absent central authority. Built on omerta and family loyalty, these groups offered protection and an alternative form of justice. As Italian immigrants, facing prejudice and poverty, flooded American shores in the late 1800s, they brought these traditions, which mutated into powerful organized crime syndicates in American communities. Mafia power exploded with Prohibition in 1920. The 18th Amendment created a colossal black market overnight. Mafia families swiftly seized this vacuum. Bootlegging generated immense wealth, fueling rapid expansion and solidifying their grip on urban centers. With immense profits came the desire for legitimacy and protection. Mafia families systematically infiltrated city governments. Bribery became standard practice, influencing elections and securing political favors. Judges, police, and politicians found themselves on the payroll, ensuring illicit operations continued with impunity. Beyond politics, organized crime found lucrative avenues in labor unions. Control over powerful organizations like the Teamsters provided direct channels for extortion. They manipulated union elections, embezzled pension funds, and strong-armed businesses for payoffs or favorable contracts. This infiltration secured no-show jobs and funneled money through legitimate fronts, blurring lines between legal and illegal. The construction industry and public contracts were prime targets. Mafia-controlled companies rigged bids, eliminating competition and guaranteeing lucrative projects. From waste management to shipping, they established monopolies, extorting protection money and laundering vast sums. This was a sophisticated, multi-layered criminal enterprise. The true scale of this empire was publicly unveiled during the 1950s Kefauver hearings. Televised testimonies shocked the nation, revealing pervasive organized crime influence across the country. While its overt power waned, the mafia's early activities cast a long shadow. They shaped systemic corruption in business and politics that persists in subtler forms today. Understanding this evolution is crucial to recognizing the deep-seated challenges that still face American society. Understanding the origins of the American Mafia is crucial, not just for historical context, but for recognizing the enduring patterns of influence that continue to challenge integrity in both public and private sectors. The Mafia, a name now synonymous with organized crime, did not simply appear out of thin air on American shores. Its deep and complex roots trace back to 19th century Sicily, a region with a long history of foreign domination and a deeply ingrained distrust of central authority. In this fragmented, often lawless landscape, secret societies and powerful local figures emerged, offering a twisted form of protection and enforcing their own brand of justice for a populace largely abandoned by the state. This shadow society built on a foundation of clientelism, a system of social organization based on the exchange of goods and services for support, and the infamous omerta, a strict code of silence and non-cooperation with authorities, offered a perverse kind of order where none existed. These networks thrived in the absence of a strong, reliable state, evolving into sophisticated systems of private justice and, ultimately, extortion. When waves of Italian immigrants, many from Sicily, arrived in America in the late 1800s and early 1900s, they were not just seeking opportunity, they were fleeing endemic poverty and social stagnation. With them, they brought these deeply ingrained Sicilian traditions of loyalty, silence, and self-reliance. In the bustling, often hostile urban environments of New York, Chicago, and New Orleans, these immigrants faced discrimination and a lack of official support. It was in these dense, marginalized communities that the transplanted customs from the Old World found fertile ground. Early criminal networks, such as the notorious Black Hand extortionists, solidified their presence, preying on their fellow immigrants by offering protection or demanding tribute. For many new arrivals, these figures represented the only form of order or authority in their lives, establishing a powerful foothold for the illicit enterprises to come. However, it was the 18th Amendment and the dawn of Prohibition in 1920 that truly catalyzed the American Mafia's explosive growth. The nationwide ban on the manufacturing and sale of alcohol created a vast, unregulated, and immensely profitable black market. Mafia families, already skilled in running illicit enterprises on a smaller scale, were perfectly positioned to seize this unprecedented opportunity. They swiftly and systematically took control of every facet of the bootlegging industry, from clandestine distilleries and breweries to the complex distribution networks required to transport and sell illegal liquor across major US cities. The massive, untaxed profits generated by this trade were unlike anything they had ever seen, providing an incredible influx of wealth that transformed loose, localized gangs into sophisticated, hierarchical criminal syndicates. This new financial might funded further expansion, armed their soldiers, and allowed them to consolidate power. As rivalries erupted into bloody gang wars for control of lucrative territories, a brutal process of natural selection occurred, from which emerged powerful, disciplined crime families who established dominion over entire cities, building criminal empires that would last for generations. With their coffers overflowing from bootlegging, these powerful mafia families began a calculated and systematic infiltration of America's core institutions. Their first and most critical target was the political structure of the cities they controlled. Through sophisticated bribery, carefully applied intimidation, and the strategic placement of loyalists in key positions, they corrupted officials at every level of government. Mayors, city council members, and other politicians became beholden to the mob, facilitating criminal activities and shaping municipal policies to benefit their patrons. They influenced elections, swayed judicial outcomes by compromising judges, and co-opted entire police departments, ensuring their illegal ventures could operate with minimal interference. This deep-seated corruption created a shield of impunity, a parallel system of power where justice was easily subverted and the rule of law was secondary to the will of a crime boss. The Mafia's reach extended just as deeply into the American labor movement, with powerful organizations like the Teamsters Union becoming vital tools for organized crime. Controlling union leadership was a strategic priority, as it gave them a stranglehold over the nation's economic arteries. Through threats, payoffs, and the manipulation of union elections, mobsters placed their cronies in positions of power. Once in control, they used the union's might as a weapon. They extorted legitimate businesses through threats of crippling strikes or violence, demanding protection money and forcing companies to use mafia-controlled services. They secured preferential, often fraudulent, contracts for their associates and even treated union pension funds as their personal piggy banks, skimming vast sums of money from the savings of hard-working members. This infiltration provided immense power over vital industries like trucking and transportation, allowing them to dictate the terms of work, the movement of goods, and the cost of doing business, all while stifling any form of legitimate competition. Beyond politics and labor, organized crime found another profoundly lucrative avenue in the construction industry and the world of public contracts. With massive government projects constantly underway in growing cities, the opportunities for graft were nearly limitless. Mafia families perfected the art of rigging bids, ensuring that lucrative public works contracts were awarded only to their associates or to companies they secretly controlled. These projects, often delivered with substandard work at grossly inflated prices, served two purposes. They siphoned millions in public funds directly into the mob's pockets, and they provided a perfect mechanism for laundering illicit profits from gambling, loan sharking, and drug trafficking, transforming dirty money into legitimate assets. They also monopolized essential municipal services such as waste management, shipping, and food distribution. This deep entrenchment meant that the daily life of a city, from the skyscrapers being built to the garbage being collected, bore the silent, costly imprint of organized crime. This systematic corruption acted as a hidden tax on the public, diverting funds, stifling economic growth, and embedding the mafia into the very fabric of American commerce. For decades, the mafia operated in these shadows, its true power and pervasive nature largely hidden from the general public. Despite their clandestine nature, however, their grip on the nation eventually became undeniable. The veil of secrecy began to lift in the 1950s with the advent of nationally televised congressional hearings. The 1951 Kefauver hearings, led by Senator Estes Kefauver, brought the shadowy figures of organized crime directly into the living rooms of the American people. The hearings shocked the nation, offering a stark and public glimpse into the mafia's extensive network and its deep infiltration of America's most trusted institutions. These revelations, followed by later investigations spearheaded by figures like Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy in the early 1960s, continued to expose the vast scale and depth of their operations. The public outrage and tenacious law enforcement efforts that followed began to chip away at the mob's mystique and its shield of impunity, solidifying a national understanding of the profound grip organized crime held on the country. The legacy of these early mafia activities is profound, shaping the landscape of systemic corruption in American business and politics in ways that are still felt today. They laid the foundational blueprints for leveraging power, wealth, and intimidation against democratic institutions and fair markets. The sophisticated methods of bribery, extortion, and influence peddling they perfected created templates for illicit operations that persist, even if the perpetrators have changed. Though their most overt and violent methods eventually faded, replaced by subtler forms of financial crime and white-collar manipulation, the blueprint they created endures. Understanding these roots, from the fields of Sicily to the backrooms of City Hall, is essential to recognizing their modern and often invisible impact on our society. Honor filled a power vacuum left by ineffective government, providing a unique form of protection and justice outside official channels. These traditions formed the bedrock for what became the Mafia. As Italian immigrants arrived in America in the late 1800s, especially in burgeoning cities like New York and Chicago, they carried these customs. Faced with discrimination and poverty in a new, often hostile society, many found familiar social structures in nascent criminal enterprises. Early Black Hand gangs and nascent crime families offered community support and a path to illicit power. The Mafia's true explosion came with 1920s prohibition. The 18th Amendment banning alcohol created an incredibly lucrative opportunity. Bootlegging transformed small gangs into powerful syndicates. Figures like Al Capone amassed fortunes, expanding operations, bribing officials, and solidifying control over vast illegal networks. This immense wealth fueled extensive political corruption. Mafia families systematically infiltrated city governments, using bribery and intimidation to influence elections, judges, and law enforcement. They secured favorable rulings and a blind eye from authorities, cementing their municipal power. Beyond politics, the Mafia saw immense potential in labor unions. They infiltrated powerful organizations like the Teamsters, controlling leadership. This enabled them to extort businesses through strike threats, rig contracts, and skim vast sums from union dues and pension funds, turning legitimate unions into criminal instruments. Their reach extended into construction and public contracts. Organized crime families rigged bids for lucrative public works, laundered enormous sums via shell companies, and monopolized industries like waste management and shipping. This controlled essential services, embedding their power and extracting wealth from legitimate commerce. The 1950s Kefauver hearings, televised nationally, offered the public a shocking glimpse into the Mafia's pervasive influence, exposing leaders and operations. While overt violence receded, the legacy of these early activities, systemic corruption, sophisticated money laundering, and illicit influence in business and politics, persists in subtler forms, shaping society today. The roots of this organization lie deep in Sicilian traditions, migrating with Italian immigrants in the late 1800s. This story is about power, corruption, and enduring influence, shaping American society and its institutions in profound ways. The Mafia concept originated in Sicily, evolving as a system of self-protection against oppressive rulers and a parallel justice system. Facing discrimination and hardship in America, Italian immigrants brought these traditions, adapting them to the New World's challenges. This environment allowed criminal enterprises to flourish, offering illicit opportunities where legitimate paths were scarce. The 18th Amendment, establishing prohibition in 1920, was an unexpected gift, a game-changer for organized crime. The national alcohol ban created an immense, insatiable demand for illicit liquor across the country. Mafia families rapidly built vast bootlegging networks, generating unprecedented profits from illegal operations. This immense wealth fueled their rapid expansion, transforming localized gangs into a powerful national syndicate, an undeniable force. With new financial might, the Mafia systematically infiltrated city governments across America. Bribery became a standard tool, influencing elections, corrupting judges, and compromising police forces. Through intimidation and payoffs, they secured immunity, silencing opposition and ensuring their illegal operations continued unimpeded. Organized crime also strategically targeted powerful labor unions, especially the influential Teamsters. These unions, controlling vital transportation and logistics, became key to the Mafia's control. They extorted businesses, threatening strikes or violence to secure lucrative contracts and control over commerce. This strategy extended into legitimate sectors like construction and waste management, rigging bids on public contracts. Mafia families monopolized industries, laundering vast sums, transforming illicit gains into legitimate business fronts. Shipping and trucking also fell under their sway, creating pervasive underground networks of control. The 1950s Kefauver hearings shocked the public, revealing the Mafia's deep corruption on national television. The legacy of these early activities shaped systemic corruption that, in subtler forms, persists in business and politics today. This criminal empire originated from deeply ingrained Sicilian traditions of fierce loyalty, omerta, and profound distrust of authority. As Italian immigration surged dramatically in the late 1800s, La Cosa Nostra clandestinely crossed the Atlantic, establishing formidable strongholds in major ports. It provided crucial protection and informal justice for desperate immigrant communities, establishing its formidable foothold in major American cities like New York and Chicago amidst pervasive discrimination. The 18th Amendment's prohibition in 1920 became the Mafia's undisputed golden ticket. The alcohol ban created an insatiable black market, quickly monopolized by ruthless crime families like the Genovese. Bootlegging generated immense wealth, allowing them to expand influence and solidify their grip on urban landscapes. They fostered widespread lawlessness and corruption. Wealth then brought political influence. Mafia families systematically infiltrated city governments. Bribery became their primary tool, swaying elections, corrupting officials, securing favorable judicial rulings, and ensuring police complicity. Intimidation, often violent though subtle, ensured compliance, deeply compromising public service integrity through a pervasive web of corruption. Their reach extended into American industry via labor unions such as the Teamsters, which was notoriously influenced by figures like Jimmy Hoffa. The Mafia exploited union power to extort businesses, threatening strikes or sabotage. They secured no-show jobs and funneled union funds into illicit enterprises, gaining immense leverage over legitimate commerce as a critical expansion of their power. The construction industry, with its massive public contracts, proved fertile ground for illicit schemes. Mafia-controlled companies rigged bids, securing lucrative projects at inflated costs. They laundered vast sums through these fronts, monopolizing essential services like waste management and shipping, blurring lines between legal and criminal ventures. Despite clandestine operations, the Mafia's influence couldn't remain hidden. The 1950s Kiefover hearings brought unprecedented national exposure, revealing organized crime's vast reach. Subsequent federal investigations and the Mafia's profound societal impact persist, subtly challenging our political and economic systems. Indeed, the very word mafia itself conjures images of shadowy figures and ruthless power, though its true origins are rooted in 19th century Sicily, where, amidst a lack of central governance, informal systems of protection and justice emerged. When impoverished Italian immigrants began their mass migration to America in the late 1800s, they brought these traditions. In chaotic urban centers, these nascent groups offered a twisted form of security and opportunity, laying the groundwork for organized crime. The American Mafia truly exploded with Prohibition in 1920. The 18th Amendment banning alcohol inadvertently created a goldmine. Bootlegging transformed fledgling gangs into powerful criminal syndicates. With vast sums of illicit money, these groups expanded rapidly, consolidating power and establishing hierarchical structures that mirrored legitimate corporations, complete with distribution and enforcement arms, solidifying their grip on urban America. This immense wealth allowed insidious infiltration into American governance. Mafia families systematically corrupted city administrations through widespread bribery and intimidation. They bought off police chiefs, influenced judicial appointments, and even rigged local elections, creating a network of political protection. This influence meant convictions were rare, allowing operations to flourish with impunity. Beyond politics, organized crime sank its teeth into the labor movement. Powerful unions, notably the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, became prime targets. By controlling union leaders through threats or payoffs, the Mafia could extort businesses, rig contracts, and ensure no legitimate competition emerged. This stranglehold over key industries provided a steady stream of illicit income and a powerful lever for control. This control extended deeply into construction and public contracts. Mafia-linked companies rigged bids, siphoned off public funds, and laundered their ill-gotten gains through seemingly legitimate fronts. Industries like waste management, shipping, and food supply often found themselves under the monopolistic sway of organized crime, forcing businesses to pay protection money or face violent repercussions. The 1950s marked a turning point. The Kiefover Committee hearings, televised nationwide, brought the Mafia out of the shadows, exposing its tentacles reaching into every corner of American life. These revelations shocked the public, prompting increased law enforcement efforts and ultimately the RICO Act. Today, while the overt violence of the classic Mafia era has largely receded, its legacy endures. The methods of influence, bribery, intimidation, exploitation of loopholes, and control over crucial industries continue to shape systemic corruption in business and politics, albeit in subtler forms. The story of the American Mafia remains a stark reminder of power's corrupting influence. As a name now synonymous with organized crime, the American Mafia didn't simply emerge. Its origins are deeply interwoven with Sicilian traditions. Rooted in a culture of distrust for official authority and strong family ties, concepts like omerta, or the code of silence, became fundamental. When Italian immigrants, many from impoverished southern Italy, began their mass migration to America in the late 1800s, they brought these traditions, which regrettably provided a fertile ground for organized crime to flourish in the New World. Prohibition, enacted with the 18th Amendment in 1920, inadvertently became the Mafia's greatest catalyst. Banning alcohol created an enormous illicit market. Mafia families already skilled in clandestine operations quickly monopolized bootlegging, distributing illegal liquor across the nation. This generated unprecedented profits, transforming fragmented gangs into powerful criminal enterprises, capable of commanding vast networks and resources and establishing firm control in major cities. With newfound wealth, the Mafia systematically infiltrated city governments, Bribery and intimidation became their primary tools. They influenced elections, secured favorable rulings from judges, and even corrupted police forces, essentially creating a parallel system of governance. This allowed them to operate with impunity, extending the American Mafia, a name synonymous with power, mystery, and illicit enterprise, has left an indelible mark on the nation's history. To understand its influence, one must look to its origins, which are deeply embedded in Sicilian traditions. The concept of the Mafia first arose from a pervasive lack of central governmental authority in 19th century Sicily, a place where secret societies, born of a need for protection against poverty and oppression, evolved to offer their own twisted form of justice. This distinct social structure, emphasizing loyalty, protection, and a code of silence known as omerta, was carried to a new world through waves of Italian immigration in the late 1800s. Upon arrival in burgeoning American urban centers like New York, New Orleans, and Chicago, these immigrants faced harsh discrimination, abject poverty, and a desperate struggle for survival. In this fertile ground, the complex societal framework from their homeland took root, initially offering a form of community support. However, this soon gave way to more predatory practices. Informal Black Hand extortion gangs emerged, preying on their own communities. Over time, these rudimentary groups gradually evolved into the more structured Cosa Nostra, a formalized network that exploited the vulnerabilities within struggling immigrant communities, offering a dangerous combination of protection and exploitation. While these organizations had established a foothold, it was the 18th Amendment and the dawn of Prohibition in 1920 that truly catalyzed their meteoric expansion. The nationwide ban on alcohol inadvertently created an immediate, colossal illegal market. The nascent crime families, already skilled in clandestine operations, seized this unprecedented opportunity. Vast, sophisticated bootlegging operations, the management of thousands of hidden speakeasies, and rum running from the Caribbean generated immense untaxed profits. This colossal influx of wealth transformed regional street gangs into nationally significant organized crime syndicates, enabling them to rapidly consolidate power, recruit extensively, and establish a new era of criminal dominance. This was the period that saw the rise of iconic figures like Al Capone and Lucky Luciano. The era of the gangster was truly born. Armed with significant economic might, these families understood that true power wasn't just about violence, but about pervasive influence. They began a systematic infiltration of city governments and the very fabric of American governance. Bribery became a primary and powerful tool, corrupting police officials, judges, and city politicians. Through strategic financial contributions, voter manipulation, and outright intimidation, they directly influenced local elections, ensuring sympathetic figures held positions of power. These friendly faces in office were often eager to turn a blind eye or actively facilitate criminal operations. This deep-seated, systemic political corruption provided a formidable protective shield, allowing their extensive rackets and illicit activities to flourish with minimal genuine legal repercussion, effectively undermining the very institutions designed to uphold the law. Beyond politics, organized crime aggressively extended its reach into legitimate sectors, manipulating public services and the economy for its own benefit. A critical pathway for control was the infiltration of key labor unions. Organizations with vast memberships, most notably the powerful International Brotherhood of Teamsters, became prime targets. Through brutal intimidation and the manipulation of union elections, mafia figures seized control of union leadership. This allowed them to divert vast pension funds, dictate who received contracts, and extort businesses with the threat of crippling strikes or violence. This stranglehold over workers and industries provided immense leverage and an economic stranglehold over crucial sectors from transportation to manufacturing, significantly impacting nationwide commerce. Their dominance extended aggressively into other lucrative industries, particularly construction and public contracts. Organized crime families routinely rigged bids on major infrastructure projects, guaranteeing that their own front companies or associates won. They would then inflate costs and skim profits or deliver a substandard result, effectively defrauding taxpayers. This practice also served as a perfect mechanism for laundering vast sums of illicit money, transforming dirty cash from their rackets into seemingly legitimate income. They established monopolies in vital industries such as waste management and shipping through intimidation, stifling competition and siphoning public funds. This deep integration into the economy allowed them to extract enormous wealth while maintaining a veneer of legitimacy, shielding their vast criminal networks behind seemingly legal fronts and making them incredibly difficult to dismantle. For decades, this shadowy empire grew with little public awareness. However, the mid-20th century marked a turning point. National exposure finally arrived with the 1950s Kefauver hearings. These televised Senate investigations publicly exposed the Mafia's nationwide network and its insidious reach into American life. The dramatic public inquiries shocked the nation, as millions of Americans witnessed firsthand the testimony that revealed widespread systemic corruption. The hearings forced law enforcement agencies, particularly the FBI, which had previously been reluctant to acknowledge the existence of a national crime syndicate, to dedicate significant resources to combating organized crime. The early activities of the Mafia fundamentally reshaped the landscape of American business and politics, leaving a profound and lasting legacy. While the overt, violent presence of traditional organized crime has diminished over the decades due to sustained law enforcement pressure, the systemic corruption it fostered persists in subtler, often harder to detect forms. The blueprint they established for leveraging vulnerability and exploiting loopholes remains. Bid rigging, influence peddling, and sophisticated money laundering continue to plague various industries, demonstrating the enduring consequences of their illicit groundwork. This legacy is a chilling reminder of the lasting impact of unchecked power and how its foundations, once laid, can continue to subtly influence systems for generations to come. In 19th century America, Italian immigrants brought with them their traditions, their hardships, and for a select few, the Sicilian code of omerta. Transplanted from a land with weak central authority to the bustling, often hostile enclaves of American cities, these secretive networks adapted. They initially offered a twisted form of protection to fellow immigrants facing discrimination, but soon laid the groundwork for what would become some of the most formidable criminal enterprises in the nation's history. The true catalyst for their explosion in power and influence arrived with the 18th Amendment in 1920, Prohibition. The nationwide ban on the manufacture, sale, and transportation of alcoholic beverages created an unprecedented and insatiable black market. This was the moment the Mafia had been waiting for, an opportunity of staggering scale. With existing networks, a capacity for organization, and a willingness to use ruthless tactics, Mafia families were perfectly positioned to capitalize. They swiftly seized control of the entire illicit liquor trade, from smuggling high-quality spirits from Canada and the Caribbean to operating clandestine breweries and distilleries in the hearts of major cities. Bootlegging became an immense revenue stream, funneling untaxed profits into their coffers at a rate never before seen. This sudden, massive influx of wealth was the fuel that transformed disparate street gangs into sophisticated, interconnected criminal empires. The money allowed them to purchase fleets of vehicles, bribe officials on a massive scale, and arm their enforcers, solidifying their power and expanding their operations across New York, Chicago, and beyond. With this newfound wealth came an insatiable hunger for control, and the families knew that true power lay not just in crime, but in controlling the systems of governance. They began a systematic infiltration of city governments, a campaign of corruption that would poison American politics for decades. Bribery became their most effective weapon. Through calculated payoffs and relentless intimidation, they influenced local elections, ensuring that their preferred candidates won office. Mayors, city council members, and district attorneys were placed on the mob's payroll, creating a shield of political protection. They corrupted judges to guarantee favorable rulings or have cases thrown out entirely, and they compromised entire police forces, from the beat cop to the precinct captain. This widespread political corruption created a climate of impunity, allowing them to run their vast rackets from gambling to loan sharking without fear of legal consequences. This insidious influence wove a pervasive web of corruption into the very fabric of municipal governance, making the line between the law and the lawless dangerously blurred. Beyond the political arena, the Mafia identified another potent lever of power: the American labor movement. Labor unions, particularly those with control over vital industries, became prime targets for infiltration. Organizations like the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, with its command over trucking and shipping, were exceptionally vulnerable and strategically crucial. Mafia bosses systematically installed corrupt leaders and associates into key union positions, Once in control, they wielded immense power. They could call for strikes not for the benefit of workers, but to extort businesses, shaking them down for huge payments under the threat of a complete operational shutdown. They gained control over vast union pension funds, skimming millions of dollars for their own enrichment, a practice that robbed hard-working members of their retirement savings. This stranglehold over unions provided a steady, enormous stream of illicit income and a profound influence over the legitimate economy. They could secure lucrative contracts for their own front companies, stifling honest competition and ensuring their enterprises thrived. The union became a tool to enforce their will, legitimizing illicit demands under the guise of worker representation and providing a veneer of legality to their racketeering. This control naturally extended into specific industries that were heavily reliant on unionized labor. The construction industry, a pillar of urban growth, proved particularly vulnerable. Mafia-controlled companies routinely rigged bids for major public and private contracts, ensuring they won lucrative projects paid for by taxpayers. These construction fronts served as perfect vehicles for laundering the vast sums of money generated by their other illegal activities. They monopolized essential city services, taking over waste management, longshoreman operations at the docks, and even the food supply chain. Through threats and coercion, they eliminated all competition, guaranteeing a continuous flow of wealth and ensuring that nearly every major urban development project had a hidden mob tax built into its cost. They effectively controlled the arteries of commerce in America's biggest cities, draining public funds and consolidating their economic power far beyond the realm of simple street crime. For decades, the Mafia operated within these deep shadows, its very existence often denied by law enforcement and public officials who were either complicit or intimidated. However, the facade of secrecy began to crack in the 1950s. The 1950-51 Kefauver hearings, a series of televised congressional investigations, shocked the nation. For the first time, the American public saw the chilling reality of organized crime broadcast directly into their living rooms. The hearings exposed the vast national syndicate structure of the Mafia and revealed the depth of its infiltration into the country's business and political life. Later investigations, most notably those spearheaded by Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy in the early 1960s, continued to pull back the curtain, revealing the pervasive influence of this insidious network and prompting the first serious coordinated government efforts to dismantle its operations. Though the overt power and public profile of the American Mafia have waned significantly since its mid-century zenith, its early activities cast a long and enduring shadow over the nation. The legacy is not just in the history of crime, but in the methods of systemic corruption they pioneered. Their tactics of infiltration, the strategic use of bribery and intimidation, and the deliberate blurring of lines between legitimate business and criminal enterprise created a dark blueprint that persists in more subtle forms today. The systemic corruption they engineered within political and economic institutions left an indelible mark. While overt violence has largely receded, the echoes of their influence can still be found in complex financial fraud, quid pro quo political dealings, and the operations of modern organized crime networks, a lasting reminder of their corrosive impact on American life. Illicit cash through seemingly legitimate channels, providing stable income and respectability. The construction industry was a prime target, with figures rigging bids on public contracts, laundering money, and monopolizing essential services like waste management. Control over supply chains squeezed out legitimate competitors. Immense profits were extracted from private enterprise and taxpayer-funded projects, fostering pervasive economic corruption. The 1950s saw the Kefauver hearings. Televised investigations led by Senator Estes Kefauver exposed the Mafia. These hearings revealed the shadowy world of organized crime, exposing its hidden structure and extensive reach. Subsequent investigations further illuminated its activities, eroding the myth of an untouchable Cosa Nostra. The legacy of these early activities is profound, shaping systemic corruption that, while subtler, persists today. Their methods of bribery, extortion, and manipulation laid blueprints for modern organized crime. Understanding these historical roots is crucial to recognizing enduring challenges from hidden power structures. From protection rackets to political fixes, the Mafia's strategies forged a template for illicit gains. This historical footprint reminds us that vigilance remains paramount against all forms of systemic corruption.